When a massive earthquake hits, the immediate reaction is always to focus on the shaking buildings.
Right, which, I mean, makes total sense.
Yeah, you look at the emergency response, the visible damage, the, visceral day-to-day survival stuff.
It's the immediate crisis right in front of you. It demands urgent attention.
Exactly. But geologists, they aren't just looking at the buildings, they're actually measuring the tectonic plates, like miles beneath the surface.
Because the surface shaking stops eventually, but the plates, they permanently shifted.
Right. The map has literally changed. And today, we're taking that geological approach to the Russia-Ukraine war.
Yeah, we're pulling from a really in-depth chapter analyzing the conflict's evolving strategic implications.
And just to be clear, this isn't a daily news update for you guys. Our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how a regional war completely rewrote the global rulebook.
The whole rulebook, security, economics, warfare itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the most significant military conflict in Europe since the Second World War.
Which is why it requires this level of analysis. The ripple effects are, well, they're actively altering the geopolitical ground we walk on.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We want to understand how a conflict in Eastern Europe restructures global supply chains, right?
Mm-hmm. And national security doctrines.
But to grasp those huge global ripples, we really have to start at ground zero.
The physical battlefield.
Yeah, and looking at the operational realities there, it honestly feels like a glitch in the timeline.
It really does.
We're seeing like World War I style trench warfare taking place beneath a sky filled with sci-fi drones.
I know, it's wild.
How do those two eras even exist at the exact same time?
The juxtaposition is definitely jarring, but it's actually entirely logical when you look at the mechanics of modern tech.
Really? How so?
Well, there was this massive assumption over the last 20 years that future wars would be swift, highly surgical.
Dominated by cyber operations and precision strikes.
Yeah, exactly. That was the prevailing theory in defense circles.
The idea that you could just paralyze an enemy's grid with a computer virus, drop a few smart bombs, and
the conflict would be over in a week.
Yeah, but that's not what's happening.
Not at all, because ubiquitous drone surveillance completely shattered that assumption.
Right.
The sky over Ukraine is just saturated with intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance drones, ISR drones.
So they see everything.
Everything. In previous conflicts, an army would amass a huge armored column to punch a hole through enemy lines.
Like massing tanks together.
Yeah. But today, the moment you mass 50 tanks or 1,000 troops, a drone spots them.
Wow.
And precision artillery obliterates them within minutes.
Wait, I'm trying to square this. You're saying the high-tech, multi-million-dollar surveillance didn't make the war faster?
No. It actually paralyzed movement. It made maneuver incredibly deadly.
So, because neither side can mass forces without being instantly targeted?
They're forced to disperse. They have to dig in.
Hence the muddy trenches.
Exactly. And the massive, grinding artillery bombardments. The advanced tech, like electronic warfare, satellite intelligence, kamikaze drones.
It didn't replace conventional attrition.
It forced it.
Wow. So the high-tech umbrella essentially traps both armies in a 20th century meat grinder.
Basically, yeah. Resulting in a brutal war of attrition with, incremental territorial gains.
And staggering human costs.
Staggering. And it also expands the geography of the vulnerability.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because the front line is locked in this stalemate. Both sides use long-range precision strikes to degrade the other's capacity to fight.
Oh, right. Hitting targets way behind the line.
Yeah. Russia targets Ukrainian energy grids, civilian infrastructure, trying to break national resolve.
And Ukraine utilizes unmanned aerial systems, missiles.
To strike logistics hubs, oil refineries, military facilities deep inside Russian territory.
So the concept of a neatly defined front line is just obsolete.
Entirely. It's a deep, multi-domain zone of continuous vulnerability.
Which brings us to a really fascinating dynamic. Because this war is so grinding, it stops being just a battle between generals on the ground, doesn't it?
It turns into a marathon of industrial endurance.
Yeah. The center of gravity shifts away from tactical brilliance to raw manufacturing capacity.
Exactly. In a war of attrition, victory often goes to the side that can simply outproduce the other.
But I've got to push back here, though.
Okay, go ahead.
The United States and its European allies spend, trillions of dollars on defense.
They do.
They have the most advanced aerospace and defense corporations on the planet.
Right.
So how is it that we're seeing headlines about Western countries running out of basic artillery shells?
It really comes down to structural choices made after the Cold War.
The so-called peace dividend in the 1990s.
Exactly. The West enjoyed that dividend
Mhm.
and then spent the next 2 decades focused on counterinsurgency operations, places like Afghanistan and Iraq.
Meaning they were fighting non-state actors, people who didn't exactly have air forces or massive armored divisions.
Correct. So Western defense industries optimized for exquisite, highly complex, and very expensive systems.
Like stealth fighter jets.
Incredibly capable stealth jets and precision munitions, but in very low volumes.
Ah. So they prioritized lean, just-in-time manufacturing to save money?
Yeah. And the massive, robust industrial base required to pump out millions of unguided 155mm artillery shells.
It was allowed to atrophy.
Completely.
It's like realizing your Formula One car is incredibly fast, but discovering mid-race that your pit crew only brought enough tires for 10 laps.
That is a great analogy.
Meanwhile, the other guy might be driving a tractor, but he literally owns the tire factory.
That captures the vulnerability perfectly. Defense industrial resilience is the new watchword here.
Because Ukraine's survival is almost entirely tethered to Western military assistance, right?
Advanced air defense, long-range weapons, intelligence sharing.
But sustaining that support is exposing the brittle nature of Western supply chains.
While Russia, on the other hand, seems to have brute forced its way through this bottleneck.
How? Just by shifting their economy.
They systematically transitioned to a wartime production model. Moscow reconfigured its domestic economy to prioritize the military-industrial complex.
Running ammunition factories around the clock.
Exactly. And this exposes a profound lesson for global military planners.
Which is what, exactly?
That future wars will be determined by economic endurance and the capacity for rapid industrial mobilization.
Not just technological superiority.
Exactly. Not just who has the fanciest drone.
And that's especially wild considering the political friction we're seeing.
Oh, absolutely.
There are emerging divisions within parts of the West regarding the scale and duration of future aid to Ukraine.
Right.
And if your national survival depends on someone else's factory, and that someone else has an election that changes their foreign policy.
You are in an incredibly precarious position.
Yeah, which is why this industrial bottleneck isn't just contained to the military sphere.
No, it bleeds directly into global alliances and economic structures.
Let's follow that thread into what I'm calling the geopolitical boomerang.
I like that term.
Because the strategic intentions going into this conflict have yielded some wild structural outcomes.
They really have.
Starting with Russia's stated motivation. They framed this conflict as a necessary defense against NATO expansion.
Right, viewing Western alignment in Ukraine as a direct threat to their sphere of influence.
But look at the boomerang effect. By launching a massive military operation to limit NATO.
They triggered a historic revitalization of NATO.
It's crazy.
The alliance underwent a rapid consolidation. European nations, particularly Germany, that had historically underinvested in their militaries.
Instantly reversed decades of policy.
Yeah, announcing massive surges in defense spending. But the most structural shift was the ascension of Finland and Sweden.
Two countries with very long histories of military non-alignment.
Exactly. Their integration into NATO structures completely redrew the security map of Northern Europe.
The Baltic Sea is now effectively surrounded by NATO members.
So the attempt to push Western security architecture away resulted in a larger, more heavily armed, and highly focused alliance right on Russia's borders.
That is a colossal miscalculation on the military diplomatic front.
Definitely.
But the economic boomerang is arguably even more significant because that's the shockwave that hits the entire globe.
Western nations launched an unprecedented campaign of economic warfare.
Right, sanctions targeting Russian banking, energy, and technology.
The objective was to paralyze the economic engine funding the war machine.
But again, causality is tricky. What happens when you try to surgically excise one of the world's largest energy producers from the Western financial system?
They bypassed the system. The immediate mechanism was the weaponization of finance.
Like cutting major Russian banks out of the SWIFT messaging system.
Yes, the underlying plumbing of global cross-border payments and freezing roughly $300 billion in Russian central bank assets.
Which sent a shockwave far beyond Moscow.
Profoundly. Countries in the global south watched a G20 economy have its foreign currency reserves neutralized overnight.
I mean, that has to spook the rest of the world.
It did. It created an immediate imperative for alternative financial mechanisms.
Massively accelerating the trend of de-dollarization.
Precisely.
And I want to make sure we define the mechanics of that because it gets thrown around a lot.
Sure.
De-dollarization doesn't mean the US dollar evaporates tomorrow.
No, not at all.
It means countries are actively setting up systems to trade essential goods, like oil and fertilizer, in their own local currencies.
Like the rupee or the yuan,
Specifically to avoid utilizing Western banks.
because it mitigates their exposure to Western sanctions. Concurrently, Russia aggressively redirected its trade flows.
Since European markets were largely closed off.
Right. Moscow pivoted toward Asia and the global south.
Deepening ties with China, offering heavily discounted energy exports.
The willing buyers, which introduces massive macroeconomic instability globally.
Yeah, we aren't just talking about abstract trade imbalances here.
No. When global supply chains for oil, gas, and grain are violently severed and rerouted,
It triggers severe inflationary pressures.
it threatens food security and government stability in developing nations thousands of miles away from the actual fighting.
So this weaponization of supply chains forces middle powers into a really difficult position.
Extremely difficult.
Yeah.
During the Cold War, the world was largely divided into rigid blocks.
You aligned with Washington or you aligned with Moscow.
But this current geopolitical fragmentation is entirely different. We are witnessing the emergence of a truly multipolar strategic order.
Wait, so countries aren't just picking a team and wearing the jersey?
Far from it. Nations across Asia, Africa, and Latin America are adopting highly nuanced, transactional positions,
Meaning they might condemn the invasion at the UN, but
but absolutely refuse to join the Western sanctions regime.
because they're acting in their own macroeconomic interests.
Right, showcasing a significant rise in strategic autonomy.
Strategic autonomy. Operating as a free agent to ensure your own national survival, rather than acting as a pawn in a great power competition.
That's a great way to put it.
Which leads us perfectly into analyzing who is actually succeeding at navigating this fractured landscape.
Right.
Because looking at the geopolitical data, India seems to be running a masterclass in this exact strategy.
India's response to the systemic shocks of the Russia-Ukraine war is a defining case study in multi-alignment.
Yeah, they are balancing incredibly complex relationships across major geopolitical fault lines.
It's very calculated.
It looks like an impossible diplomatic tightrope. How do they actually execute that balancing act without alienating everyone?
By strictly prioritizing their domestic economic and security imperatives.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, on one side, India maintained its long-standing strategic engagement with Russia.
Driven by what, mainly?
Two major factors. First, the immediate macroeconomic benefit of securing discounted Russian crude oil.
Oh, right. While Europe was scrambling to replace Russian energy and dealing with massive price spikes,
India was buying that rerouted Russian oil at a significant discount to fuel its own massive economy.
and interestingly, the U.S. largely tolerated this.
Yeah. Because if India competed for Middle Eastern oil, global prices would have skyrocketed even further.
That's a really crucial nuance.
It is. The second factor keeping India engaged with Moscow is legacy defense dependencies.
Right. A massive percentage of India's military hardware is of Russian origin.
Exactly. Maintaining that relationship is vital for spare parts and maintenance.
So that's the Russia side. What about the West?
Simultaneously, and here's the multi, India aggressively deepened its defense and tech partnerships with the U.S. and European nations.
Advancing frameworks like the Quad in the Indo-Pacific?
Right. They are essentially telling both sides, we will work with you where our interests align, but we won't be dictated to.
But, you know, this approach also highlighted a terrifying vulnerability.
So,
Because securing cheap oil is great, but relying on a country bogged down in a massive war of attrition for your military hardware, that seems like a massive strategic flaw.
is an undeniable wake-up call for New Delhi.
I mean, it had to be.
The disruptions in global defense supply chains prove that dependence on foreign imports, whether from Russia or anywhere else, is a fatal flaw in national security.
If your primary supplier is burning through their own ammunition stockpiles,
And facing severe export controls.
they simply cannot fulfill your defense contracts.
Exactly. If a war breaks out on your own borders, you might find the supply ships just stop coming.
Which is terrifying.
So the strategic takeaway for India wasn't just to find new foreign suppliers.
What was the policy response then?
A massive acceleration of defense indigenization through the Atmanirbhar Farhat initiative.
But Manir Farfarat, meaning self-reliant India.
Yes.
Let's dig into the mechanics of that, because it's not just a political slogan, right? How does a country actually untangle itself from decades of foreign defense reliance?
It requires a fundamental shift in procurement architecture. India is imposing phased bans on the import of hundreds of defense items.
Oh, so artificially forcing domestic production.
Exactly. But more importantly, they are insisting on technology transfers.
So when they do purchase foreign platforms,
The requirement is increasingly that the manufacturing, assembly, and intellectual property sharing happens within India through joint ventures.
they don't just want the weapon, they want the factory on their soil.
They need sovereign capability.
Yeah.
The tactical lessons emanating from Ukraine are stark.
Like what?
Well, India is closely studying the deployment of kamikaze drones, the integration of commercial satellite constellations for battlefield awareness,
Oh, right.
and the absolute necessity of cyber resilience and electronic warfare.
Which connects right back to our analysis of the bizarre multi-domain battlefield from earlier.
How so?
You have to be able to jam the drones that are hunting your tank.
Precisely. The realization is that modern hybrid warfare requires continuous, rapid adaptation.
And you cannot adapt rapidly if you have to wait for a foreign contractor to update the software on your systems.
Or ship your replacement drone motors. India recognizes that to secure its strategic autonomy in a multipolar world, flexible diplomacy has to be underpinned by an ironclad indigenous technological base.
It is a complete structural overhaul.
It truly is.
So let's pull the lens all the way back and look at the whole picture here.
Okay.
We started with a regional conflict defined by a terrifying synthesis of century-old trench warfare and ubiquitous drone surveillance.
Right.
We broke down the mechanics of why that leads to an exhausting war of industrial attrition, exposing the, well, hollowed-out nature of Western manufacturing.
And from there, we traced how that industrial reality bled right into global economics,
The weaponization of finance and energy markets.
which didn't just hurt the combatants. It fractured the global order, accelerating de-dollarization and forcing middle powers to hedge their bets.
Leading us to India, which is navigating this fragmented world by aggressively pursuing multi-alignment and Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Recognizing that true security in the 21st century means owning your own supply chains.
Yeah. The tectonic plates of global power haven't just rattled, the entire map has been permanently redrawn.
And as we wrap up this analysis, there is a profound concluding thought from the strategic literature that we really need to consider.
I'm ready.
The defining characteristic of this era is the interdependence of power.
Meaning military, economic, technological, and informational domains are no longer separate lanes.
They are entirely fused.
Wow.
A military strike destroys a factory, which severs a global supply chain, which causes inflation on another continent,
Which destabilizes a government.
which ultimately shifts an international alliance.
It's all connected.
It raises a fundamental question for our understanding of geopolitics moving
What
forward.
is that?
If a war fought on the plains of Eastern Europe can instantaneously weaponize global finance, rewrite energy markets, and force nations thousands of miles away to completely rebuild their defense industrial bases
Yeah.
in a deeply integrated multipolar world, is there really any such thing as a local conflict anymore?
Man, it really forces you to reevaluate how fragile the whole system is.
Absolutely.
The ground might not be shaking right beneath your feet today, but make no mistake, the plates are moving. Keep exploring, keep questioning the mechanics of the world around you, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.